Hello and welcome back to the Cesspool, and welcome back to the 25 Days of Christmas. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, Happy Holidays. Whatever you celebrate, I hope it is a good one. And you might be thinking, well, this is a little weird. Usually the camera is not pointed at me, it's pointed at the floor. But no, instead it's pointed at me today. Because we're not talking about something I physically have. We're talking about something that I experienced. And the title of the video says it all. I was extremely fortunate to be able to travel to Buffalo this fall to do the photography tour that was put on by Preservation Works of Buffalo State Hospital, also known as the Richardson Olmsted Complex. And it was probably one of the best experiences I've had in an extremely long time. This is something that I've wanted to do for, like, I couldn't even tell you, literally years. I've been to Kirkbrides before. I've never been able to go inside one. Whichever one that I either spot off the side of the road, or if I'm able to go up to it, I've never been inside. And even if I were to go inside, it would not be the way that I would want to see it. And we are very fortunate that there are a few Kirkbrides still left out there that are being maintained not only on the outside, but more importantly on the inside. And obviously, you know, all of the preservation work being done at the Richardson Olmsted Complex is absolutely incredible. To see a place that massive, you know, slowly coming back to life. It is slow, but what has already been done is incredibly impressive. And what's being planned to be done is even more impressive. So you have to, you know, applaud them where it's due. The complex looks beautiful. You know, all the work being done is done right. And the fact that, you know, whether they want to or not, they have to keep the original interiors mostly intact. It's absolutely a unique situation, and it makes for a very unique restoration project. But I'm not going to talk about the part that's already been renovated. If we're talking about Buffalo State, we're talking about the part that's abandoned. Because that's what I got to explore. Now, I did get to go to the already restored parts. I obviously the Richardson Hotel, which is a beautiful, you know, hotel. I wasn't able to go into the actual hotel hallways. The only thing that was open was the admin building, aka the hotel lobby. But even just exploring that, absolutely gorgeous. Everything restored, really beautiful work done there. And honestly, I cannot recommend enough just hanging out there for an afternoon. Even if you're not doing one of, you know, these special tours, or you're not staying there, you know, it's just a beautiful campus. And the hotel's an amazing place just to hang out for a couple hours. That's what I did. I made it to the Richardson Olmsted Complex early, as I would, because I'm stressed out about that kind of stuff. But it ended up being maybe 3 hours early. So, and I knew that I wanted a little bit of time, so, you know, I walked around the buildings. And then I just sat in the hotel and I read for like 2 hours, and just, you know, finding a nook inside you know, a Kirkbride, and just sitting there and reading in, you know, pretty much quiet. You know, this was like the middle of the week. Actually, no, it wasn't the middle of the week. It was the weekend, but, you know, it's not a peak time for them. So, you know, the upper floors of the hotel lobby, the admin building, were pretty quiet. So I was just able to sit there and read for a while, and it was really surreal to, you know, be sitting there under this massive, you know, 10-foot giant window with these huge vaulted ceilings, and it was just pitch quiet. It was just pitch quiet. And the most interesting thing about it is that, you know, after having that experience, then going into the part that's still abandoned, which is the majority of the complex, I'd say 60-70% of the complex is still abandoned. But, you know, it either has plans for restorations, or they are currently looking for plans for restoration. Nothing, as far as I'm concerned, is being demolished, or there's no talk of demolition of any of the complex, which is obviously great to hear. You know, we lost three wings from the male side of the complex back in the 70s when they were building the new Buffalo Psychiatric Center. So, to know that we're not going to lose any more is obviously great. The way the tour was set up, you make your way down to the art center. It's kind of in the basement of the admin building, and then you meet up. There's a group of maybe 30 of you, and everybody's super nice. All the tour guides, everyone from Preservation Works, super nice people. Everyone was super accommodating. It was very, very nice. And this was a photography tour. As much as I love Kirkbrides, I needed more of a reason to go out there than for the regular tours that they offer. As much as I would love to, get out to Buffalo again, that's not going to happen for a long time. I need a real reason to go. So this photography tour, Preservation Works put together, it was 4 hours compared to their normal tours. Even their photography tours were, I think, 2 or 3 hours. And with this 4-hour tour, we got to see a lot more of the complex than anybody else really has. So it's a really unique experience. And not to mention that there is talk that in the spring they will start renovations on some of the complex. So I wanted to see all of it as much as I could before those renovations took place. So I was like, well, I gotta fucking do it. So I went. I went and there I stayed for a night. And this photography tour, everybody was, extremely professional, really cordial. Everybody there clearly had some kind of photography background, whether they were hobbyists or professionals. There were people shooting on film. It was really cool to see everybody kind of take in the complex in different ways. I of course had kind of, I knew what to expect, and even I was really floored when I was inside. But to see people who, they went for the photography aspect to get in there, it was really, really interesting. And it really shows that, the general public doesn't really have an understanding of these buildings until they're inside one. It really changes your perspective. So I'm just going to go over the basics of everything and how I felt about each of the buildings that I made it into. So my tour group ended up only having 3 people. So that meant that for the most part, you're on your own. The way that the tours worked is, you signed an agreement. It's a hard hat tour. These buildings are abandoned. They are dangerous. They only let you go into certain parts of the buildings, but what they do let you into, which I'd say 75% of the building, is, free reign. You do your thing. They give you a time limit. They say, hey, be back here and at this time, and we're moving on to the next thing. So that's pretty much how it worked. I started all the way at the end of the female wing in the most, violent ward, because it was the furthest away from the admin building, as was always the case in the Kirkbride plan. Despite, Buffalo being so big that it kind of, it was a super Kirkbride, if you were to say that. So again, all the way at the end, got to see some of the more violent wards. There were some interesting subjects in there in the main common space, of course. There was the electroshock therapy machine and the electrocephalogram, if you will. There were some safes. There were a couple of other pieces of furniture. The fireplaces throughout the whole complex were absolutely gorgeous. The hallways were really thin. They were a lot thinner than I expected for the main, patient wards, where there were actually rooms on both sides. The ceilings were still incredibly, they were so tall, like I don't even have a reference. They were at least 15 feet tall. At least it felt like it. The complex was also really interesting, and I felt this a lot during that first section and a later portion in particular. There was a lot of wind, whistling through the whole place, and there were moments where no one else would be talking, and it felt very eerie. I never felt scared. You didn't get like that horror movie kind of feeling, despite being alone essentially, because each ward is massive in itself. So running into one other person out of 4 of you, including the guide, who's really just taking pictures himself, It's rare. You know, you might stumble into the same room and then you get a little caught off guard. But you know, you'd hear a door creak open or the wind, you know, whistle through the hallways. You know, flap the drapes, and yeah, you get a little bit of a chill up your spine. But it's the feeling that I felt the most commonly when I was in those wards alone. If there were other people there, you don't really, you know, it's a little different. But the isolation and the loneliness is very apparent, and I imagine when the buildings were, you know, active, you know, the loneliness was a little less so because there were so many goddamn people there. They were obviously extremely overcrowded for most of their existence, as is common with Kirkbrides. But being in there alone, the feeling, the isolation, and just you could really feel the energy that was left behind. And I know that's cliche to say, but once you're there and you think about the place for just a little bit of time, you know, even though you're busy taking pictures, I was busy taking pictures. I you know, I would put my camera down for a second, the camera that I'm recording on right now, and I would just kind of look around, and you know, you hear the whistling, and you hear the wind whipping through the hallways. You hear a door creak, or you know, something from outside, and it just breaks the silence. It's very lonely, and for the most part, extremely quiet. And it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. I've gone in my fair share of abandoned buildings, but something about the size of it is really what made the space seem so isolated. You yourself are so small. Everything is supersized because of, you know, again, the way the plan was set up. You have extremely tall ceilings. You have, you know, tall doorways. You have wide doorways. Everything is big and airy, and it feels like it's built for giants almost. And you're just this little speck, and it doesn't really care about you being there. It's almost like you're not really noticed, and it's kind of like being a fly on the wall, despite there being no action. But in the more violent ward, the hallways were a bit tighter. There was one that was wide, but there was also a operating bed or operating table that was, you know, it was probably placed there. They had some props that were definitely placed there, some that were not. But that one made for some fantastic photography. And I believe after that we moved on to the next female ward that I think was closest to the admin building. And that kind of led us through the main, you know, sections, the parts that you know better, again, the huge hallways, the deep with the windows at the end, everything, you know, the whole 9 yards. And it was absolutely fantastic. And that was the majority of the wards. They all, you know, kind of look similar. But that was where the isolation really sunk in, because we had multiple floors to explore. And I found myself just on one of the floors, just alone. And I was walking through this place. I'm like, there's nobody here. There's not a soul, you know, within screaming. I couldn't hear, you know, the guide talking downstairs. And they allowed you to do this. I didn't just wander off the tour. It wasn't really how it worked. But just, you know, I had this massive building to myself. And, you know, a building with so much, you know, for better or for worse, very rich history. And it made for a very interesting place to photograph. And some of the photos that came out were really, really amazing, honestly. And there are certain rooms that, you know, emanate with you more. Definitely the wheelchair room, as I'm going to be showing you on the screen. That room stuck with me a lot. The loneliness of that room alone was, honestly, it kind of took me out of reality for a little bit. And I just sat in there for a bit and just looked at the wheelchair. I took my pictures and I was happy with them. And I was like, yeah, that's good. And I just kind of stayed in there for a while. And I listened to the wind, against the window. And I just, the sun was shining perfectly onto that rocking chair. Not that rocking chair, that wheelchair. And it was really, really just surreal. And some of the other things that we got to see were the famous pocket doors. Many of them had already been removed, or in the later renovations of the building, they were turned into regular doorways, which is really sad. But some of them do still exist, luckily. So to see that was really cool. We got to see the original safes of Buffalo State Hospital with Buffalo State Hospital on them. They were in the basement of one of the extension buildings, the kitchens, and that area, which they were originally mess halls, but then they kind of converted them into mixed use spaces. The lighting that came into those areas was really, really dramatic, really awesome, honestly. And the curves of the hallways that led from those buildings back into the main wards was really special as well. The decay of the place is really interesting. I'm saying really a lot. It was very interesting because the whole place is made of either brick or bedrock limestone, like strong materials. And there are instances where the building's being reinforced by new cinder blocks, concrete, steel poles, the whole 9 yards. But for the most part, they are very, very structurally sound. Again, there are a couple floors where there's some holes, and they say don't go in there. Which if you're smart, you listen to them. They know what they're talking about. But for the most part, the buildings are in very good condition. The only thing that you're really seeing is paint chipping off the walls. The tin ceiling kind of dangling a bit. But other than that, they're pretty clean, and they are now at least maintained, which is really nice to see because they want to reuse them. But it makes for a unique subject because there's kind of a juxtaposition between what you're seeing, the paint chipping off the walls, the ceiling, but it's so clean. It's like it's still being maintained actively, like someone just swept the floors. And then, to an extent, that's the case, but it makes it almost seem like there are still people using the space, even though there aren't. We also got to go through the basement. That was actually how we maneuvered through most of the buildings. The only times that we actually went outside or through the actual patient hallways that would go between building and building, the fire airlocks, was when they were stable enough. Those were definitely the most unstable parts of the buildings, were those fire airlocks. So the basement was usually the quickest way, and the basement was pitch black. There were no lights. They were like, turn your freaking flashlights on. You're gonna step on stuff. Be careful, and you keep up with the group, or else you're gonna be lost in the dark. And that was definitely, I was one not to stop and take pictures in the dark, not just because of being scared of being left behind, but more because the pictures wouldn't turn out that great, at least on my camera that doesn't do night shots very well. But we had one of the 3 guys in my group, he would get left behind a little bit because he would go to take a shot at something, and I was a little worried for him. I'm like, oh my god, we're going to turn a corner and this guy's going to be lost in the dark. That happened a few times where he would, kind of stop to take a shot, even if we were in, daylight. But I was just a little worried for him. I'm like, this guy's going to get left behind, he's going to get lost. If you don't know the building super well, which I don't really think he did, I can't even say that I do. I think I would be able to figure out how to get around just through general knowledge. But this guy seemed like he was really there for the photography, and it made for again, an interesting juxtaposition of what he found fascinating versus what I did. And as an outsider, I think just the beauty of the interiors of the space. There's a beauty in the abandoned, in what's been forgotten and left behind. But of course, there are the actual architectural details that are beautiful as well. and the subjects that are created through abandonment. So yeah, we explored all of these different spaces. I believe we went through 4 or 5 of the different wings that were available, including the single male wing that was not demolished or converted at this point, and its adjoining kitchen mess hall, which was really cool because there are some minor differences just because the building took 20 years to construct. So there are some my architectural differences. There are a couple of floor plan differences. So it was really interesting to see that way. They also did let us out on the balconies, which was pretty cool. I was really looking forward to doing that. Just that was always something I had wanted to do, was to make it out onto a balcony where the patients would be sunning themselves or just taking in fresh air, that was the point of them. So, later in their life, I imagine they would just host beds. But that was the original intent of the porches. And unfortunately, I actually had to leave the tour early to make my flight. We had not really scheduled the time correctly with that one, but I still very much am happy with the time that I had there. And my takeaways from the entire experience were that the Richardson Olmsted Complex, Buffalo State Hospital, is probably one of the most architecturally distinct and typical at the same time of Kirkbrides. The Gothic, the Richardsonian Gothic architecture, or Richardsonian Romanesque, but it's really Gothic. The Gothic architecture of that complex in particular is so dramatic that it is the perfect asylum. It has massive, towers and castle-like elements. It's huge, sprawling, tall ceilings, rows and hallways full of patient rooms, big ornate lobbies, all the typical asylum stuff. And I know we always associate the typical asylum with Danvers, just because it's Danvers, but Buffalo kind of takes it to another extreme, and I think that's just because of its size. Like I said, everything is kind of supersized there, and it does make you feel small and isolated. And I imagine that when it was originally constructed, it was very warm and welcoming, a lot like the lobby of the modern Richardson Hotel, but being in it now where it's cold and dark, physically and metaphorically, it feels very intimidating. And I imagine that as a patient later in the building's life, we're talking 40s, 50s, 60s, I can imagine that it was a scary place to be. While originally it would have been warm and welcoming, as was the case with all Kirkbrides, pretty much. When they went downhill, it was a very quick descent, and it's sad to see the building in its current state, but it's very hopeful at the same time, and it's beautiful. There is a beauty in the abandoned, and that might be one of the best examples of a beautifully abandoned building that I've ever been in. And I have been in a few, I've seen many, and the state of the building is kind of perfect for photography, but also for you to still appreciate what it was and what it is now. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. It was a fantastic experience. I would love to do it again, and it makes me want to make it inside more Kirkbrides because we are losing them, and we need to support groups like Preservation Works, which are working so difficultly, as my cat would say, very difficultly. They're working hard to keep these buildings alive. Yes, I know. So that's what I have to say. That is my not really a committed episode, but I'm talking about Kirkbride hospitals. So please just bear with me, okay? I'd like to thank everybody so much for watching. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate. I hope it is a good one. And if you're keeping up with these videos, I will see you tomorrow. And if you're not, I don't know when the next video will be, and I definitely don't know when the next committed episode will be. But I will see you guys then.